One, two, one, two, three.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Local Youth Worker, a podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. I'm your host, John Parrott. I'm here with Brian Montgomery. Brian, how's it going?
Man, it's going good. Thank you for having us, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And sporting a beard, as I said last time we spoke, did not have a beard. So looking good. Listen, those who listen to the podcast consistently know that Brian joined us. I cannot remember the episode number, but we talked about something very sobering. Those who know Brian's story know that his son Walker lost his life to a trend that was taking place on Instagram referred to as sextortion, and that has just continued to be something that many families have been impacted by. And Brian was so encouraged by just your courage to talk about something that's just so difficult and trying to raise awareness for other families. And since that podcast aired, I've heard from numerous people about how it's blessed their families, about how your testimony has encouraged them. And I've been encouraged just from that we've had a friendship through it, that you and I have been able to continue to stay connected, that we've been able to meet a few times, share a lunch together, a couple lunches, and just continue to keep up. And I know, as I've heard from people, just curious about, how you're doing. And so as we've swapped texts and emails, I thought it'd be great to have you come back on and give us a little bit of an update. So how about just before we get into other things, just update us on your family. Tell us how you're doing and how your family is doing.
Yeah, John, thanks again for having me. And it's really interesting over the past, I'm going to say it's going to be about a year ago, maybe a little bit less than a year ago that I was on the podcast. You were the first podcast I did after we learned about what happened to Walker, why he took his own life and the circumstances around that. And man, I just thank you. I think the listeners, you look around the world, truly it's around the world, the people that have reached out to us in support. Never would have dreamed it. I don't think we could have made it without it. I think that it's brought these friendships and relationships have brought a meaning, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, it's hard to even think that's realistic, that the loss of our son could end in some way of meeting other people's needs, but that's what's happened, and it's fostered some phenomenal friendships. Yours, one of them, and so thank you for that. And just, I think that, I don't know, it seems like, and we'll get into some of the other details of our lives, but over the past year, and we've done numerous, I don't know, I'm going to come close to probably 100 speaking events in total, maybe more than that. Just people wanting to hear the story of what happened and to for us to tell the story of who Walker was and what happened to Walker and shed some light on his parents, how we deal with tech. And so I'd say our family, I think we're okay. Courtney and I talk all the time about it, but it seems like some days are like, man, I'm really struggling today, and some days are okay. And so I think that, of course, this, our faith is what gives us that ability. I've seen Courtney grow over the last year. I've grown over the last year, grown in our relationship with Christ in ways we didn't know that we could. And I think that's just biblical. You see that when you're counting on, you have to have, it's almost like breath in your lungs. When you have to have that to survive, you cling to him so much tighter. And my daughter Caroline, she's grown probably the most in the past year. She's really stepped into understanding and seeing what God can do with tragedy and seeing, even though it's difficult and how hard it is, how much people are affected, and it's been extremely encouraging. Bennett is Walker's little brother. He's growing up, man. It's crazy. He's been forced to grow up in a lot of ways. He went from being a 13-year old little boy to losing his brother and having to face some really difficult situations over the course of the past year. Of course, he and I have gotten a lot closer because time was, as far as guy time, my time was divided between Walker and Bennett, and now it's just me and Bennett. So it's just different, and lots of little small details like that in our family have changed in the last year. And Sarah, she's 12. She's still pretty young, but she's coming into her own. She's starting to step into that stage in life where they growing into a teenager. So everybody's okay. We're I would say that our faith continues to be what keeps us where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
Yeah. All right. And I know holidays can always be tough. Whenever we lose loved ones, and we've recently gone through Thanksgiving and Christmas. How was your family during those times?
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll be honest, we tried to maintain some sense of, I don't think the holiday season will ever be what it used to be. I'll speak for myself. We lost Walker on December the 1st, which was the week after Thanksgiving. So coming through the week of Thanksgiving, your memories are, well, a year ago, Walker was here, all the things that were happening that week and everything in those days and weeks leading up to Walker's death they just come under a microscope. So everything is, you hyper focus on small details that you wouldn't ordinarily. And so I think we all had that in a way through those, whether we're talking about Thanksgiving, actually the year date after Walker passed away, going into Christmas, there were so many emotions a year ago going into Christmas, having lost Walker, and just, our world was upside down. And at the same time, realizing that we've got to get to a place where that's not our focus 24/7, and not a question of whether or not Walker's not on our minds, but he wouldn't want us, being sad all the time. He would want us to celebrate what Christmas was about. So we really, I thought a lot about it, and we talked some about, and try to keep our Christmas traditions as normal as possible. But just to think through what kind of celebration, there was in heaven, at the birth of Christ, and what kind of Christmas Walker was having compared to us. And, try to really, something that and it's interesting. I had really done a pretty in-depth study on heaven prior to ever losing Walker. This was probably been 2 years prior to any of this. And when you start to learn about the details of what heaven is really going to be like, what we understand it, I don't think we can ever truly understand it, but it's going to be something that we can hardly imagine. I don't think we can imagine it, but to put it into some perspective of, the original intent of God was a world without hurt, without pain, without sin, without any of these difficulties, but at the same time, a true physical place where we see one another, we recognize one another, and we get to worship Christ in a way that we can't imagine here. So all of that's a reality. That's a truth that we can embrace, that truth, or we can kind of, think about it as floating on clouds. And so that time, that's where my mind went a lot, is what's Walker up to? What is he doing? What are they doing today? And at the same time realizing that our family, we were still together. We're still together, and so we love each other, and just enjoying that time together.
Well, definitely. I mean, as Scripture tells us to grieve with hope. Your testimony sounds just like that.
Yeah.
There's grief, and there's hope, and um, yeah, just the promise we have of the new heavens and the new earth. That this life isn't all that there is, and thank you for pointing us to that. And as you and I have continued to stay connected. I know there's another update, and it's uh, so often as uh, followers of Christ in this broken world, we can just shake our heads and say, "God, what are you up to?" And yeah, you have something else to share. That's just one of those that caused me to have that thought.
Yeah, so if I go back, we lost Walker December the 1st of 22. January of 22, I was diagnosed with a stage 1 colon cancer. And many people, if you're aware, if you know about, have any awareness of colon cancer, stage 1 is typically, a tumor they remove out of your colon that's many times it's precancerous, but in this case it contained cancer. And so we went and had surgery, had that section of my colon removed. Everything was clear in my lymph nodes and in my colon elsewhere. Everything was fine, according to the doctors. They said everything, you're good. At this point, typically we see with a stage 1 where it's no other locations. You're 95, 6, whatever percent cure rate. You'll never have to deal with this again. You're done. So we were happy about that. Caught it in time, and then we lost Walker in December. Of course, we're doing 6-month checkups. Fast forward, this past September, went back and had an elevated CEA level. And they were like, "Hey," they called me back. I mean, we went. That doctor, even when we went to see him to begin with, he said, "This is you're done with this. It's so remote chance of this coming back. We're not worried about it." Did our blood work. Got a call 3 days later. Said, "Hey, there's some things we need to look at. We need to get you in for a PET scan." Um, and turns out I had metastasis to my liver, which puts it at stage 4 colon cancer. If you look up that on the internet, it's not a good prognosis. It's involves chemotherapy, surgery, and then more chemo. And I mean, just being honest, the survival rate's not great. But that's where we're at. And as to your point, God, what are you up to? And I mean, from the beginning, I mean, it's a lot of questions on how God operates in our lives, and why. I mean, a lot of these things, a person that don't have an eternal perspective could say, look, you just made a series of bad decisions. I mean, and um, I'm not saying I didn't make a series of bad decisions, but we make decisions every day that some of them could end in catastrophe, and many times they don't. And so I have to look and see those circumstances and say, you know what, God's doing something here special. And so I guess to finish updating you, we've gone through 4 treatments of chemo pre-surgery. Um, Coming up on going back to MD Anderson for liver surgery. They're going to remove a significant portion of my liver to take those tumors out. Um, Looks like the response to the chemo was good. Those levels decreased over that time period. We'll have a better understanding when we get out to MD Anderson to do some more tests pre-surgery. But we'll have surgery, and then as soon as I recuperate from surgery, I'll go on take another 8 treatments of chemo through spring and early summer. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot for our family to digest. It's a lot for us to digest, and I think that, and we knew that through, we were talking about Thanksgiving and Christmas. We found that out in September, um, and I can't view it any other way than whether it's, whether it's through these kind of conversations we're having, or whether it's through other people that are inspired to do more for Christ in the long run, whether it's my kids, whether it's your kids, whether it's other people listening to this message. Maybe I'm long gone and in heaven right there with Walker and hanging out, or whether I'm here for another, 40 years. God has the answer to that. I don't. But I have to have faith. I have to trust. And if you don't have an eternal perspective, and I think that's really where a lot of this boils down to is, and I see it regularly with people I talk to. I mean, I don't know how, without an eternal perspective, I don't see how you navigate these kinds of difficulties. I couldn't. It'd be impossible, because then you're left to just the circumstances of life and what can I get out of life in the amount of time that I have, whether that's 100 years, 50 years, or whatever. And it just doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be the most profitable way to live if you really boil it down. So we're taking that opportunity to serve in the best way we can, and we constantly get people saying, "Hey, what can we do? Is there anything we can do?" I mean, I think that anybody from the outside looking in sees our lives, and it causes fear, causes anxiety. It's how can I not be the Montgomerys? And I told somebody the other day, I'm tired of being the one on the prayer list, but that's where we're at. I mean, it's. And I'm not saying I'm certainly not saying I don't want people putting us on the prayer list. I do. We've got to have that. Mm-hmm. You and I talking, offline a minute ago about, privacy and those types of things. And I guess and that's what I told you a while ago, is that, I need the troops. I need them to rally. I need them to rally around us in prayer, because that's the only way that this has a positive outcome, is through Christ and His power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen, for sure. And I can just remember when you sent me the email and first told me about your cancer. I just stared at the screen, and I was thinking I had to be misreading that, and reread it. And you and I had a phone call after that, and yeah, it's just again, we are finite. God is infinite, and His thoughts, His ways are beyond us. And as you continue to just point back to faith, that our circumstances do not dictate His faithfulness and His steadfast love for His children. And it can cause us to be confused. And I know God is patient beyond measure, and He's patient with us. He understands we don't get it, and we don't understand. But the first time you came on and you shared about Walker, I told our listeners to pray for you and your family. And I said to pause this podcast and pray. And so anyone who's listening to this right now, I want to encourage you to do the same. I want you to pause and to pray right now for Brian, for his family, specifically for this cancer, and asking God to remove it, knowing that His will might be otherwise and His will is always perfect, but asking that you'd pray for Brian to be healed and for his family to be sustained in the midst of the chemo and the surgery. And I want to ask you to continue to commit them to prayer. And that's part of, as Brian and I, again, have been talking, we've wanted to have Brian come back on sooner, but this is some of, what we've discussed of letting people know, just how your family's doing. And this, I even asked, are you sure you want to share this kind of publicly? And as you just said, yeah, let's get more people praying about this. And so that's part of why we're having this podcast.
Well, and also, I want other people to see that, I see through what's happened with our family and losing Walker, and how people want to see that what they experience in life is not it. And what I mean by see that is they want to see that other people can experience that, because that's kind of how we operate in life is we live by, we see our peers and how do they respond. And if our peers, if they're responding with hopelessness and despair, then that's typically how we respond, and I know that Courtney and I talked about this quite a bit with when we lost Walker. I mean, we talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people that had lost kids, and some of them, after 3, 4, 5 years down the road, still seemed hopeless. And I just told Courtney, I said, I don't want that. I don't think that's not the God we serve. If that's it, then something's not right here, and we're not. I mean, that's not who God is. God is not a hopeless God. He brings hope. He brings us to a place that we can see that there is a future, even in spite of difficult, really, really difficult situations. And so, I guess what I want to make sure is that people because there's people out there that are in just as bad of situations as we're in. And it's not easy. It's nothing about this is easy. I mean, so I don't want it to sound casual in how I'm presenting this, but we serve a God that created this universe, created the air we breathe, and if He could do that, He can bring us through this situation.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I appreciate your candor of clinging to the faith and God's goodness that you're proclaiming, but then also just saying, hey, this isn't easy. We don't need people who just fake it and act like, this is easy. This is ups and downs. This is good days, bad days, all of that. And I think that's important for Christians when we go through something like this to be vulnerable and to be transparent. And so I'm grateful for that testimony you're giving.
And I think about, I try to listen to what I would almost consider, secular voices in our society, as well as, being led in a Christian way to some Christian leaders. But I think about somebody like Jordan Peterson. Jordan, he won't come out and say he believes that Jesus is who Jesus says He is, but his response, I think it's unique. I think it's a very honest answer, though. What he says is, my actions will dictate what I believe, in other words, how I live. If you believe something, you act on that belief, and and to the greatest example of that are the disciples. You take Paul, you take Matthew, Mark, you take all those guys, that were there with Jesus, their life actions demonstrated that they believed. They had a belief that was worth them giving their lives voluntarily for. Mm-hmm. And so I think as Christians, we have an opportunity. Well, I think our faith will be revealed based on how we live. And so coming through this, I have to ask the question, Brian, what do you believe? Because you'll live out what you believe at the end of the day. And I want to live out what I believe. I know what I believe. I know that we believe that Christ is who He said He is, that He was crucified and resurrected, and that He lives today. We believe that. Well, if I believe that and I walk around my head down all the time, that is contrary to what I say I believe. And so I want to encourage Christians specifically, because that's what society is looking at. They're saying, hey, Christian, you say you believe this, but you don't live anything like it. You live like you don't believe. And we need, this is a spiritual war we're living in. And we need soldiers that believe it, not say they believe it. And I hope that one day that Christ will say, well done, Brian. Well done. And I'm encouraging, I want to encourage everybody else that says they're a Christian to live it. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. I hope you don't have to encounter what we've had to encounter to be called to face that. But be prepared if you do.
That's a good word, Brian. And I also want to give you some time to update us just on the investigation as well. I know there's a lot that you cannot talk about publicly, and so whatever you can share, I know our listeners would be interested to hear for sure.
Yeah, specifically to the investigation. I mean, we know that the suspect is in Nigeria. We know that. That's where they tracked him to, which there's a pretty strong presence of those guys that are doing this coming out of Nigeria. And the law enforcement continues to say that they're encouraged that they will make an arrest. So to this point, specifically to Walker's case, that's as much as really we can discuss. But relative to what's happening in this space from a law enforcement side of things, we've got a lot of challenges to meet the volume of crime being committed, I guess is the best way that I can put it. Um, the suspects that are really being investigated and tracked are those that are ending in either tremendous financial losses or death, like Walker. Those are the only ones we really have the resources to track. And so, over the past year, it's been so interesting that since we've become public, and people have been able to get in touch with me. Typically, it's been through my Facebook page, just my personal Facebook page is how people have contacted me. But it's so insane that because we're willing to talk about it and we've gone down this road, we're a safe place for either teenagers or parents to say, "Hey, I've got a son going through this," or "I am going through this and I'm a 16-year-old boy," or you name it. I mean, the contacts that we've made of people that have been extorted, just like Walker was, I can't tell you how many it's been. Um, and so the problem is that those suspects that are perpetrating those crimes, law enforcement, either local law enforcement, is typically not well equipped. They're typically not well equipped to handle the reports. They're not very well equipped, and this is not specific to any particular law enforcement agency. But I'll tell you that we're in Starkville, Mississippi. Starkville and Columbus is pretty well equipped. Our local community, they've got staff that can handle tech criminals, and which is unique from what I'm hearing across the country. I mean, we had a call a couple weeks ago, a month or so ago, from a kid, and he called his local police department, and they said they'll have somebody out there Monday. I mean, this kid's going through it at the time. He's trying to figure out how to, what to do, and they have really nothing for him. Just, "Hey, we'll come out there and file a report on Monday." And you know where that went? It went into a drawer, and nothing's ever done. It's that person that was responsible for that act is still out there. And look, I'm not being critical to law enforcement. I know they've got their hands full, but we have to come up with an answer for that. And we have the ability, we just don't have the resources. And we've learned that with all the effort that they've put into Walker's case. I mean, I've been so impressed with our FBI, so impressed with law enforcement and how they've rallied around us and committed to, we're going to figure this out. But it's very difficult to knock a dent in the volume of how many times this scheme is getting executed on teenagers, by arresting 10 or 12 people a year, and so I think it's a challenge we're still facing as we go through.
Yeah. And Brian, do you know, is this, are the statistics on this extortion specifically, are they increasing? Are they seeing more cases of this? Any word there?
I don't have the answer in the last few months. I know, the 2023 was an increase for that calendar year. What it seems like to me is that the number of, at least this is just anecdotal evidence because it's just what I see and hear, but vacation periods, whether it was Christmas vacation, summer vacation, spring break, anytime that it seems like kids are home by themselves or home from school and got time on their hands, apparently those guys have a calendar of events and understand when our teens are going to be most vulnerable. And that seems to be the times during the year where it happens the most. I don't know the answer. I would have to believe that because it's become there's been so much media on it that in the past year that's got to be helping some. But I'm just not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, and maybe this is kind of getting into some other information. I mean, you said you've been traveling around speaking a lot. You've done
Mhm.
podcasts. I know you're interacting with the FBI, and when you came kind of close to where I live, and you were talking to a bunch of law enforcement. I
Yeah.
cannot remember the exact venue. Just what are some things you're learning? And as you said, the FBI's been great, and they're continuing to learn in this.
Mhm.
Just kind of the behind the scenes there. What are some things going on there?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the name of the game, I guess would say behind the scenes, is just trying to figure out ways to create more awareness. I mean, that's really their only answer today is awareness. And at the same time, the expectation that the bad guys are constantly innovating to try to create more revenue. And so, you know, AI has become a pretty strong point of conversation in the past year. We're just getting into the world where these guys are using it, but it's the outcomes can be extremely scary whenever they can create voiceovers that sound just like a person's dad or girlfriend or husband or wife. Can create imagery that is so realistic that anybody would believe it. Those types of schemes, there's a lot of concern over where that's going and what's going to happen when those things happen. So the reality is that without us all working in different sectors, I mean, you take law enforcement, they can't really repel this type of activity without cooperation from the tech companies. The tech companies are facing, regulations. We hope we're trying to get some things passed legislatively that will mandate that they put in some provisions that protect kids. But you kind of got to look at it from their perspective. If they voluntarily do that and their competition don't, well, then they're in a situation where competitively they've just let down their shareholders. It's a pretty complex problem.
Hmm.
And so I would say, the behind the scenes is I mean, I think there are ways that there are situations that I would disagree with. Tech has known for a long time that these things cause harm,
Hmm.
and and they've known, and many people many of our lawmakers have known as well. But because of the financial capacity of this industry, there's not been a willingness to regulate it. Now, going forward, I believe we have enough support now that they're going to have to. I mean, there's too many negative consequences coming down the road that we can't control.
Yeah.
Um, so we're hopeful that some of those things will change. But if we're not all on the same page, cooperating, recognizing the problems, and working towards a solution, uh, no one agency can handle it by themselves.
Yeah. And it does in some ways. It seems discouraging when you think of just the influence, the power, the money behind some of these companies just
Hmm.
make them seem invincible. At the same time, it does seem that culturally, I mean, from even on this podcast, we talked about the U.S. Surgeon General's report that came out last
Hmm.
May. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, is just highlighting data research that's continuing to create this awareness where it's I think to the point where it cannot be ignored anymore, or either right to that point where things are going to start happening. And I mean, kind of along those lines as well, as you're talking about raising awareness. I know you said Fox Nation came to your house recently, and that
Hmm.
there's maybe in March something they're airing, and so maybe just tell us a little bit about that as well, and yeah, how people can keep a lookout for that.
Yeah, I mean, so Fox Nation contacted us. I don't know, would have been probably October, and they're they have done another program on internet safety and the dangers there, and I think it was extremely well received. And so they wanted to go a step further and do like a 3-part series on online safety, and just a professional group of people came to our home. Were very sympathetic. Just really wonderful people. Did a great job. Spent most of the day in our home. Really got to know them, and we're expecting that to air sometime in March. Not exactly sure their timeline, but that was the last conversation we had was March. And we see that there's an appetite. People want to know what they want to understand, what the dangers are. In a lot of different settings where I speak, I kind of use the analogy: you don't defend against something that you don't know about, or something extremely unrealistic. And that's where we were, with Walker. We didn't know. We didn't know that. I mean, we knew that there were possibilities for some negative outcomes, but we didn't know that we would go to bed normal and our son would be gone the next morning. We didn't know that. We didn't know that was a real possibility. And so realizing that, we see that the rest of the world, once we started sounding this alarm, and we're not doing that all our own. There's a lot of people out there that are having this conversation now. But once it started to happen, it started bringing attention to larger media organizations to say that we need to be talking about this because people want to hear about it. And so we're thankful for that. We're thankful that, we've been given that platform to obviously, Walker's life can mean more than just what happened in one night. I mean, the people that knew him knew what kind of kid he was, knew what kind of person he was, and we're able to share that with larger audiences. And that's to our point earlier. It almost brings some sense of meaning to this really difficult situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I applaud you again for just sounding the alarm and continuing to step into opportunities like that with Fox Nation, because that's difficult at the same time. And I know it's in some ways reliving it continually as you do that, but I know that'll be a resource that many will be served well by. And again, that's in March, so people can be on the lookout for that. I know we're going to be wrapping this up before too long, but I'd love to get into maybe some action items for those who are listening. As people here, they're hearing your story, they're listening to this interview, but it's kind of, okay, what can we do to help? And of course, we've talked about prayer and continue to ask people to pray, but what are some thoughts there of how people can help and how people can get involved?
Yeah, I think, the number one message that we're kind of proposing is just to engage this problem. I mean, at a very local, when I say local, in your home. If you don't have kids at home, if you're a grandparent, friend, you've got somebody close to you that has kids, teenagers that are facing this problem, and starting to educate on the dangers, just as a simple, just understanding where our challenges are. I mean, the reality that anybody on this planet through that cell phone can reach a teenage boy or girl in their bedroom at night if they're alone. And you say, well, that's not really that big a deal. We didn't think it was a big deal either. And it may not end in a situation like with Walker. It may end in a situation of somebody being groomed for trafficking. I mean, that's a sector that, man, you talk about make you want to throw up. How many people are being trafficked, either for labor or sexually in this world? And the United States is the hub for that. How can that be? How can we abide by while that happens in our backyards? But it is happening, and we're conceding to the fact that, well, it's not our kids, it's not my kid, it's not my neighborhood, and that's just we can't take that attitude. So I mean, it's a lot easier to go to our basketball game tonight, or go to a neighborhood party, or do whatever that's fun. Those are fun things to do. Those are fun things that we go through life doing. But we've got some real issues that we have to stand up to and address. And to start, so my point is to start at home and educate our kids where the dangers are. Engage with technology. Hopefully set that expectation that oversight is not a bad thing. I'm using the word oversight because that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to train my kids how to use a dangerous tool to be productive with it. We want all the good technology gives, but we want to protect against the bad that it can bring. And that's tough. I mean, that's a road that we've got to navigate and know the turns and twists before we take off heading down the road 100. And that's that's kind of how I feel we did. I mean, we just kind of didn't understand there were some massive obstacles in that road, and we didn't protect against it. And so, other than that, I think that starting to look at these different legislative agendas and where you have influence, reach out to your legislatures and let them know that we're promoting this Kids Online Safety Act, and it's been a challenge to get it to a vote. This thing's got bipartisan support in the Senate. I mean, like over 50 co-sponsors now. How does a bill that's got that much support, how does anything have bipartisan support in this country anymore? That ought to tell us something.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that needs to pass, and we need to stop fussing over it. We need to set the priority of our kids above the priority of donors and sponsors and financial aspects. We're working in Mississippi to try to get a bill passed, a local state bill for internet safety. Working with Bart Williams on that, and we're hoping that's going to be something that's going to hit the legislature this spring. If you live in a state that doesn't have an online safety bill relative to minors, start that. Don't wait like we did. I mean, we've got a platform because we lost our son. You don't have to lose your kid to engage this process, and we're asking people to engage. That's the best way I can put it.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the Kids Online Safety Act?
Yep. It's the two authors are Senator Blackburn and Blumenthal. So you've got bipartisan authors on the bill, and it's supported. Mississippi, both our senators are co-sponsors. Lots of states are not, but still, you got over 50 that are co-sponsors to a bill. I mean, that's pretty strong.
Yeah. Well, I'll link to some of that in the show notes too, that people can go and check out. Now, I want to go back to something you said, just to put a finer point on that, because this is such a big issue. And like you said, I mean, across the world, literally, that you've heard from people dealing with this. And so it can seem just so helpless to deal with, but starting in the home, like you said, parents that are listening to this, this is one way you can fight what's going on, that you're educating, talking about this in the home, not being afraid to talk about some of these things that are sensitive to talk about, but then also to the youth workers who are listening to this. Many youth ministries utilize Instagram and other social media platforms for their ministry. Be cautious with that. Think of ways in your youth ministry how you can have screen-free retreats, screen-free times with students. Even talking about this in a large group with your youth ministry could be an important thing. And youth workers that are out there, oftentimes you can highlight these things to the parents that might be clueless. And so taking those opportunities to just start small in your own home, in your own churches, talking about this. And I know one of the related issues we were talking about before is pornography. And Brian, I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about what you're seeing, just the correlations there.
Yeah, so I mean, there's several. Boy, it's a big topic because and how tech is contributing to that. So if you're a male and you have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, I'm sure there's others, but how it doesn't seem. It just happens. I mean, there's this. It's almost like the industry throws. If you're familiar with fishing, throws a buzz bait right out there, like every 7 or 8, 10, 12 scrolls of the screen. There's some bait that gets pitched out there that's may not be completely. It's not pornography, but it's leaning in that direction, right? It's a partially dressed. I'm speaking from a male's perspective. A partially dressed woman. She's mostly dressed, but she's posing in a way that's very revealing. You name it. Well, it's not a big deal. Is what we would say. That's just what it is. I mean, it's not until that leads to something a little more, and you slow down on that post, and now it's not once every 20, posts. It's once every 10, and then you slow down a little more. Next thing you know, it's every third one. It looks like that, and the next thing you know, a teenage boy who is extremely sexually driven hormonally. Next thing you know, he's in pornography because it's so accessible. and I look at the evolution of that. I mean, I'm 47 years old, graduated high school in '94, and probably observed my first pornography probably when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? It was in the form of a magazine or, a VHS tape or something like that. And I'm just talking candid here. I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
embarrassed. I mean, I think that's part of the power of this sin, of this activity, is the embarrassment of it. At the same time, the you know nobody talks about it, and so it becomes this real private, sketchy, scary issue that if somebody knows about, the embarrassment is through the roof, and that's where Walker found himself, I believe. Um, but you go back to that time where a kid either had to have a friend that had it or had to muster up the courage to go into a gas station and buy a magazine. Versus today, it is the most graphic, the most enhanced version of sex that we could even imagine at that time. Well, now it's in a teenage 16-year-old boy's pocket, in the bathroom, in his bedroom, and anywhere he wants to have it. Okay, so um, I was of the opinion, because I was ignorant, that it would be very similar to the way I grew up, in that it could cause some issues with your expectation of your wife, with your expectation of your girlfriend, with your sex life in general. But that would be the end of it, and I did okay, so not a big deal. The problem is that those are the things that they're using to trap either teenage boys or teenage girls into all manner of problems, all manner of situations that could result in tragedy. Whether that's in this trafficking world, whether that's in situations like Walker's. I believe there was pornography on Walker's phone. And if you'd asked me, I would have, if you'd asked me before any of this, is Walker looking at pornography? I said, yeah, probably. I would imagine he is. Um, and I should have taken that more seriously. Is where I'm coming from. And if I would have, I think Walker just saw this as an extension of pornography. I think that opportunity to step into this trap, um, he didn't really see any different. And what he didn't know is that the bad guys had set a trap for him, and he fell for it. And so I want to encourage, number one, I mean, you look at the statistics. I had them pretty handy not long ago, but no one is immune from this statistic of how many people are looking at pornography. Um, Whether we're talking about pastors, we're talking about Christians, we're talking about non-Christians, nobody's immune to it. And those statistics, when you bring them up, nobody wants to talk about it, because most of us have or are in those statistics. And I mean, the statistics doesn't lie. Math is math. And if we don't get real about that and address it, it is seriously affecting the relationships between males and females in our society, husbands and wives, their sex lives, their sex drive, our families having kids. All those things are being affected.
Mhm.
And the industry, we don't even know of that industry. What percentage of the people that are appearing in those scenes? What percentage of those people are trafficked? What
Mhm.
percentage of those people are in the drug trade? What percentage of those people are just a 17-year-old teenage girl that's been taken from her home? We have no idea, because it's gone untouched for so long, and that is a major factor, I believe, in where we go from here in terms of protecting our kids. And it's not just protecting them from what happened to Walker, it's protecting them from things that are going to cause them difficulty in life, and then making choices to recognize that this is a path I don't want to go down.
Mhm. Yeah, no, apology for talking about it. It's one of those topics, like you said, many people shy away from it and they don't want to talk about it. And there's also those who grow tired of talking about it because it's just such a constant battle and issue in our culture. And I think that's part of what the evil one tries to do, just wear us down and get us
Hmm.
to give up and not talk about it. And so, again, parents listening to this, talk about this in your home. Don't be embarrassed to talk about it. Get wade through the awkwardness and just do it. And I would say, at younger and younger ages, be talking to your children about this. And youth workers in proper context, talk about it to your students, and make sure that you do that in a wise way, because this is a sensitive subject. But yeah, we've got to be talking about it. And Brian, I know we're wrapping this up. Why don't you, before we close out, talk about Walker's mission a little bit, this nonprofit that you've started?
Yeah, so I mean, once we kind of started speaking last spring, I went ahead and formed Walker's mission, and we're still trying to fill out exactly where we live in that space and what our main what we can do to make a difference. Up until now, what we've done is tons of speaking engagements, and we've made some sweatshirts and t-shirts and stuff like that, just to continue to put the topic in front of people, of internet safety and this whole space. So we're still trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to make the most impact? One of those things is, where do people see this? Where are they going to observe what we're trying to the message we're trying to spread? And so, the ideas are: do we need to be producing buying space on social media, warning of the dangers? Do we need to be assisting law enforcement? You talked about all these kids that are just they encounter this crime of sextortion and they don't have anywhere to turn. I mean, there's some great assets. National Center for Exploited and Missing Children they've got a hotline that a kid can call at any point in time, and that'll get them to somebody to talk to, no matter what time, day or night, 24 hours a day. We need to make sure we post that. We need to make sure we're spreading that. That needs to be a pretty consistent reminder on social media specifically, and we need tech companies to agree to that. I mean, that if you're encountering a stress, a situation that is stressful enough that you would consider taking your life over, here's a number that you would call. I mean, they know that these kids are experiencing that on their platforms. They need to be promoting that number. And so whether it's trying to put pressure on those companies to do that, or doing it ourselves, that if a shoe company can buy space on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, then we can. So we're at a point where hopefully we get through these treatments for cancer, and we're going to bounce back and be right back as good as ever. And we're going to be moving that forward. I was talking about Caroline. She's really taken a leadership position in that, with the sweatshirts and t-shirts and posting things on Walker's Mission. So follow that on Facebook and Instagram, and just look for opportunities to support that. And I would encourage anybody that thought they had some way to contribute, whether that's through just idea, whether that's through resources. We need help with that, with web development, with promotion, with all those things. And so I know the audience has got a lot of resources. We're not trying to, where we're at. I mean, we're not in this to make anything other than to make a difference in our society, and hope that families don't have to deal with what we've had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Brian, did you say you have a website for that, or is that Instagram and Facebook only?
Right now, it's Instagram and Facebook. We should have a website up and going within the next month, is what my expectation is.
Okay, gotcha. I'll try to link to some information there, and just again applaud you for continuing to just raise awareness and using Walker's life to hopefully spare many from just all that you've had to endure. But just applauding you for continuing to do this. I do hope that we're able to have you back on maybe sometime later in the spring with some updates, and just again encouraging our listeners to continue to pray for you and your family in the midst of this season. But Brian, thanks again for coming on today.
Yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for having us, and continuing to pray for us, and continuing your friendship. Thank you for that.